So for you as an abolitionist, how do you respond to people who say, someone convicted of a violent crime should, stay in prison for however, I mean, there's life without parole, there's 10, 20, 30, all these years.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that? How can you make the argument that that difference between violent and nonviolent crime is not as relevant as most people think?
So, this isn't to take away from victims' families if
Mm.
there was a violent offense, such as they state. I say, look at the human being, the person, the individual. Let's hear that person's story. Let's see how we can transform the harm they've caused. But first, you have to look at the harm that was caused to them, allow them to heal from that. Because there's a whole bunch of shields and barriers that you build up that you can't even see that you've caused some harm because you're in your own pain. So let's first address the pain that the individual is in and then get them to see the harm they've caused. It's called accountability. How do we allow that person to be accountable for the harm that they just caused? Someone or something. Often a lot of people that are incarcerated and spending a lot of time in prison didn't have any money or to make bail. A lot of the high population is either up there for domestic violence or property damage or theft, high amounts of stealing money.
Mm.
There's an issue with that. Now, how much of the population that really cause harm is murder, mayhem, or arson? Those are very small populations. So we have put more value on someone stealing more money than someone taking a life. I would suggest there's women up there that's spending 40 or 50 years because they had high theft, grand theft, larceny. You get like double sentences for that. You know what I'm saying? Or traffic drugs, you get double sentence for that. And we're saying, how can we get them to see that they cause great harm in that too?
Yeah, yeah. And the way to do that.
And that's part of the work that we do as a national movement, part
Mm.
of Families for Justice Healing, and nationally part of the National Council. We work with formerly incarcerated women to really get them to see all the healing that goes with that and how we could assist the rest of our sisters that are inside to learn the harm and what it takes to heal.
And healing is the crucial thing, both for the person and as well as their ability to engage in accountability, to become accountable.
Become accountable.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more? You mentioned earlier, just briefly, the work you're doing on Kimia's house. And this, I just think it's a beautiful idea. So if you can talk more about what you're doing.
So I think that even going back 10 years to my release, all the time that I have been really trying to have the creative idea that I thought about sitting in that cell, how great it would be to have these type of avenues of reentry, transform harm, healing in a dramatic, theatrical way. All the stuff that me and Kimia did in the cell, laughing and dancing, and COs coming in and telling us to go to bed, be quiet, and we tell them to get away from the door. We're not harming nobody, And we started learning through that. And that's what I said, I'm going to take away, and we're going to develop a reentry program that's going to entail all that. Substance abuse counseling, theater, storytelling, creative writing, computer literacy, right? And process getting a GED or GED prep. How great would that be? How great would it be to have a theater built and we start, I think back at Kimia lost her biological dad. And it hit her in the head that she applied to go to his funeral and the system said, oh no, you have this dad on your minimus. Your minimus is what your court sentence is that goes back to the prison as to saying this releases you to the state, and this is the MIT, right? And in the MIT, when you get sentenced, they ask you, it's an intake process, they ask you who's your family members, who you want to list for emergency and all that. Well, she didn't know. I mean, her stepdad raised her, but she had a relationship with her biological dad. But because the state back in probably the crime bill of 94, or the Truth and Sentencing Bill in 80 or whatever that was, changed the law and said that only immediate mother, father, sister, brother, that you can attend a funeral. That's with the state.
Mhm.
So she didn't have her dad on there. So I said, no problem. We're going to give you a funeral in here. And we did. The girls got together. We sat in the day room. We took, um, the cotton swabs, the
Like Q-tip?
Q-tips,
Uh-huh.
and we painted them with yellow markers on the top to make it like it was candles.
Oh.
And then we took a whole bunch of cookies and cakes and everything, the creativeness that women do when they're cooking. And they made cakes and everybody had pasta, and we made the chairs separate, and we came up and made a podium.
Uh-huh.
We had her funeral service.
Yeah.
We gave her the services that she needed and deserved, real creatively, and it was so beautiful. The women got up and spoke about her and spoke about the dad that she had always talked about. He was a dancer, and he was comical and humorous and all the things that she obviously got from him, because that's who she was. And so I was like, that's what we have to do. That's all in healing in itself, when we can give those type of supportive services and allow women to speak their truth of how we view each other. And so that's what New Beginnings, Kimia's House, is going to be about. Theater, drama, psychodrama therapy,
Mhm.
individual counseling, group therapy, and then culinary arts and everything else that we've partnered with Tufts University, Berkeley School of Arts,
Mhm.
Boston College Law. We want to give women all the different career development
Mhm.
that can really counter the trauma that she's still holding on to, that she may not even know she still has. We
Yeah.
have to get to the core of it. And we believe that it's effective. It was effective for me and many other women that came home. And so it works. And so 2020, right before COVID, I did a course at Boston College, and it was Professor Gianari is brilliant. He allowed formerly incarcerated people to come in and take a business entrepreneur course with their law students. So you partnered with a law student,
Uh-huh.
so the law student can have a connection of social justice or social, processes, and understand the world of which formerly incarcerated people live, and see if they could help us create an idea of having a career, what we thought maybe we could do, for profit or nonprofit. Well, I was pretty much already established. For the past 4 years. I've been developing my nonprofit.
Yeah.
The whole idea was to get a house.
Yep.
And so taking this course, at the end of the course, you're able to do a PowerPoint presentation for your business pitch.
Mm-hmm.
What's the ask? Can you, and I couldn't process. I'm like, how can I ask somebody for a house? Really? so, so I did it. Me and my Brooks Robinson, young, I think she was 21, lost, maybe she was 26, but she wasn't in her 30s yet.
Yeah.
And she was brilliant. And she saw my vision. The first class is when the students got to choose who they wanted to have as their partner.
Mm-hmm.
She showed me, and it was a perfect match, because she just dived right in and really helped me understand all the different processes that I was trying to get to, that I didn't quite have, even though I had my 501.
Yeah.
And so we did the PowerPoint presentation, and after the third month, and it was time to do our business pitch, we were ready. And Professor Gianari brought the world of business people in,
Mm-hmm.
wealthy people in the classroom, and me and Brooke sat up there, and we did our business pitch presentation. And I had done extensive work with really developing a solid board, really developing connections in the community with these, organizations. And we was able to really develop being credentialed so we could have sustainability with billing, with
Mm-hmm.
the insurances. And that was as far as we can go. We had created policies and procedures. We saw the vision started to come to life. And so I did the best I could. And at the end, I felt like, wow, nobody asked the question. Well, after class, I got home And I had an email. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And the email said, "Hi, Stacey. We thought your presentation was wonderful. We want to offer you support and buy the house." And I sat there and I looked at the email for 2 hours and I was like, "Is this real?" And so I responded and said, "Oh my God, are you all serious? Like,
Mhm.
I didn't think I did well because nobody asked a question." And the woman responded, "You didn't leave a question to ask. You didn't leave a question. Do you want the house or not?" And I said, "Absolutely." So from December to March, we went on a journey of searching for a property. And one day she woke up, she's anonymous. And this is anonymous funders. She woke up, the whole idea was she knew that we were still in development stages and I still worked for the National Council. So I had, I was employed and I couldn't really dive into property search. And so she took that responsibility on to see if she could really find the vision that was in my head.
Mhm.
And so one Sunday she texted me and said, "Stacey, I can't make it today, but I saw a house that I think that you would really like. Do you want to go and take a look?" So when I went to take a look, I was like, "Oh my God, this is it. This is kitchen is huge, big counter space, a lot of spacious rooms. We could do culinary arts right here. We could do group therapy here. It had a basement. My dad always said the work starts in the basement. Basement of your legs, basement, and work your way up. So yeah, the basement is going to be perfect, right? And so the only difference was the property was too high for a wheelchair lift. We always knew, we have women that are in prison that are survived and punished. They are elderly, some are in wheelchairs, some have served almost 50 years of their life. It's time for them to come home. And so we said, okay, no problem, we'll just put a wheelchair lift in. So from there, we started saying, okay, we can purchase this house. March 2020, 10 years to the month that I came home, we fulfilled the dream of purchasing that house. The funders were so loving. They paid for the house, put it in LLC, New Beginnings LLC, to make sure that once we become solid, once we are really developed and we have everything in order, then the house goes into New Beginnings Reentry Services ownership. That's how that works.
That's amazing. I mean, I just can't imagine how much work you must have done, though, to make that presentation so sharp that everybody knew they could just trust that you will do this.
You know what, Bridget? I think about that. I was like, they really trusted me.
Mm,
They must really see that I have a vision. And
yeah.
that was most important to me. I was like, who does that? Who look at it? An individual that came from so much trauma is so committed to giving back to my sisters that you would trust spending $759,000 on a property and see it, see the vision. And they did. And I'm forever grateful to them. They just keep showing up. They just keep being supportive. We are now at the point of going through the zoning board because we went from just residential to residential treatment to residential treatment with handicap accessibility.
Okay.
So now we have to go in front of the zoning board. And so we have some resistance from the community.
Mm-hmm.
2 Sundays, we did a meet and greet. We knocked on 500 doors. This is part of the people process that Andrea James teaches us as formerly incarcerated women. We use the Transform Home, we use the People's Assembly, we use real community efforts, connections, all of it. And it works. 500 doors we knocked on, gave out 500 flyers, and 300 people showed up.
Wow.
300 people came from the community to take a tour. We practiced social distancing. We took 10 at a time. Kimia's mom and aunties came and they cooked, and we put everything in little packages. We did salad and chicken, chili chicken, and put it in little containers. Her aunt Moo made strawberry shortcake, put it in a container. Her other 2 aunties did balloons and they designed a backdrop. Everything that the house entails with all the creativeness. Her aunts are all brilliant. They're designers, they're party planners. And I was like, who knew all this? They made these bags. Here, look at the bag.
Yeah.
Give me a size. And we put the food in the bags, all the containers, crackers and cheese and grapes in a container, and we filled the bag up with the foods, and we put our brochures, and we put from Critical Resistance out of Oakland, California. They teach us about transform harm. So we had the video screen playing in the kitchen so you could hear keywords
Yeah.
about community connection and transformation. And then we had the information in the bags of the work that the National Council does as formerly incarcerated people, the work that Families for Justice's Healing does, the little logos for Owl Productions in Playwright. We had our brochures, New Beginners Reentry Services, and everything we offer. And the community showed up and loved it.
See, that is the hard work of doing something in a community, though, is that the community doesn't exist. You create it by inviting them into your work.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. So the final piece and the final question I want to ask you about is getting the women to the house. And so there's a big effort now by activists to decarcerate, right? To really push, to change, not only because COVID is risking the lives of people who are incarcerated. And we see again, Framingham was hit hard in the spring, and now we have new prisons that are getting hit. Their rates are just rising, and it will be like that for a long time. And I know that you've been part of a clemency campaign as well. So just wondered, for the final thing, if you could talk about some of that activism as well.
So I have a quote behind me. We have quote making for almost every state nationally. So this is a national movement, but more so because we are Massachusetts. We have a Massachusetts quilt that has the women's names on it that applied for clemency. Now we know that the governor, the past 9 governors, or probably the past 4 governors, have not signed any clemency since probably 92, I think. I'm not sure about my numbers, but
it's been a long time.
It's been a long time. And so, we have women that are up there, survived and punished. And when I say that, I'm talking about Angie Jefferson. Angie Jefferson is a lifer. Again, I'm a storyteller. When we start really understanding people's stories, this is Angie Jefferson.
Wow.
So this is part of our campaign. Jude, one of our sisters in the national movement, had her and her roommate paint these cards, and they made them into postcards.
Great.
So on here we write, Governor Baker, parole board, you all have the power to release our sisters now. Mm-hmm. And we piled up their office. Every year in July, the governors convene and they talk about their new agendas, their new budgets. And so we flooded the offices the last 2 Julys. Mm. We just imagined that these were bags of like Christmas cards or Santa cards. Like, you have to release our sisters. She's been in prison 29 years, raised 3 children from behind the wall, and they're brilliant children. Mm. None of them met the criminal justice system. They have all been involved in her life since they were 2, 3, 4 years old. And so she now has a granddaughter she needs to be home with. She needs to be able to care for. Angie has survived and punished, meaning her life, her past, her mom became addicted because she lost her husband due to gun violence, which was Angie's father. Angie's grandfather was murdered. Angie comes from Ruggles Projects. Trying to run around and navigate that as a young girl, with her mother being addicted, in pain, with her grandmother trying to be supportive. She obviously was in pain because she too lost her husband. And then Angie had a daughter who was violently murdered. Ironically, you have this young girl who gets beat by her boyfriend, and she takes a knife and stabs him. She gets first-degree You don't even look at her story. This doesn't happen by circumstance. So she's our face of clemency. It's time for Angie to come home. She is one powerful, quiet, real self-reserved woman in there that takes care of all of us. Angie was the first one to say to me, Stacey, you got to stop coming through here. Some of us could never come home. And you're going to do something out there that you're going to regret. You might not come home either. Go to school. Do something different. She loved me until I learned how to love myself. So I owe that to Angie. This is Kimia. Our whole campaign is free her. Clemency campaign. Again, the cards are made. I say these, although they've been to, the parole office and to the governor's office. But more so, here's the clemency quilt.
Yeah.
With all the women's names on it in the National Council, because it is a national movement. And so this one says #clemency works. Families for Justice Healing in the National Council. So we mean it when we say, it's time. It's time to sign these clemencies. It's time for Governor Baker to step up and release these women who are elderly, survived and punished, women who are dying in prison. We don't have the death penalty in Massachusetts. I think that we really need to say 10, 20, 30 years is enough time to be punished. And now it's time to heal, bring them home to their families, bring them home to a loving environment, bring them into Kimia's house so we can give them the support services that they need and deserve. There's no way that these women are going to come out and commit another crime. They've been in there for decades.
Well, and from what you've said, they've also been the support network for younger women like yourself, they have that potential to be leaders for change for younger people too.
That's right. And we stay connected. We tell them all the work we're doing. We send them our newsletters. Like, these women are so enthused and changing within themselves to even know that there's a whole community out here waiting for them. There's a whole community out here fighting for them. And so we write to them, all of Families for Justice Healing staff and members. We write to them. We make sure that we keep them alive during Christmases and Thanksgivings. We send them, we do pools for monies for for their phone calls. We have a no cost call campaign going. It costs a lot of money to have these phone calls going. It should be free. You got the burden of the family and have to pay for canteen, clothing, phone calls, packages. Now they're going to these video calls. You know what that's going to entail? That's going to stop you from having in-person connection visits.
Yeah.
That's what that's about. Each time we have a fight and win, they come up with something else to dehumanize us, disconnect the families. We should be keeping families connected.
I think that should be a fairly easy ask for people to sign on to, when you see how strong it is for families to support people as they come out.
Yeah.
Stacey, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to speak with me. I know you're incredibly busy. You have amazing projects going on, and I'm happy to be able to bring some of the work that you're doing with the audience that we have.